Pandemic forcing so much of the global population to stay home. Many wonder if there will be enough food. We see empty shelves at stores as people either panic buy, hoard, or both, fearing the supply chain will be disrupted. We're joined now by Jack Bobo here in Washington, D.C. He is the CEO of Futurity and focuses on food policy and the future of food. So, Jack, according to the Trump administration, the U.S. food supply is strong. How would you, though, describe the current state here, and what are your biggest concerns?
Well, I think that the food supply today is strong, but it is definitely under stress and strain. We've seen some of that strain in places like meat processing facilities across the United States. We have facilities from Smithfield Foods, Tyson's, Cargill, JBS that have all closed down because of COVID. And even an impact of 5 or 10% is going to be seen in the prices in the grocery stores, but ultimately in the supply in the food chain.
You know, there's also been a big uproar here in the U.S. regarding waste, with farmers pouring milk down the drains and unable to get their produce to market in time before it rots. So, at the same time, we're seeing massive lines at food banks and food giveaways in this country. What is the disconnect here, and how do you get food to people who need it the most?
Yes, and so this really has a lot to do with logistics and how our food is consumed. What people consume in a restaurant is just not the same as what they consume at home. So there's a lot more vegetables, a lot more salads that are eaten at salad bars when you go out to a restaurant, but people aren't purchasing as much of that to prepare at home. So there is actually less demand for some of that food. Things like onions are being dumped and destroyed just because there's no way to get them to consumers. On the other hand, when we think of things like milk, well, the challenge there is that fluid milk, people are still able to get that milk and consume it. But a lot of milk actually goes to cheese products that are processed and then are consumed in grocery stores. And or in restaurants, I'm sorry. So because people aren't going to restaurants, they're not eating those cheese products. And so there's no place to send that milk to be processed. And so there's this disconnect right now. And it's a challenge because there is no place to process this much milk into milk for consumers. And so there's nothing you can do with raw milk if it hasn't been pasteurized in order to get that to people who could use it.
How do you see the next weeks and months playing out? And what is the worst case scenario here?
Well, part of what's happening is that, we are trying to update the supply chain and logistics in order to take food that would have gone to restaurants in 5-pound bags that consumers wouldn't have used and find ways of repackaging that and getting it to consumers. So some of that change in our system is taking place today. However, when we look at the longer term, I think a lot has to do with when we reopen the economy, because if more and more facilities are shut down, we must reach a point at some time when that does limit the amount of products that are available to consumers. If we are able to open in the next few weeks or reopen some of those meat processing facilities, then we should just be fine. But I think we all have to wait and see whether or not the worst case plays out.
And once we get past that point, not to get too ahead of ourselves here, will this pandemic change the food supply forever and the way consumers buy food and consume food?
Well, I think it's already changed how people think about food. I think people now recognize that food production, food transportation, food processing and distribution are all essential services. I don't think people thought that just a few weeks ago. And so I think that's one way that things are going to change. But also I think that people are going to appreciate how to prepare food. So people have been cooking more food at home, and that could change long-term patterns in where we eat our food. And then I'd say the final point is people have become much more comfortable with online purchases. Before this, only about 5% of people were buying their groceries online, and now that's about 30 or 40% of people within the last month have been purchasing things online. And getting people over that initial hump of doing something on the internet is always a challenge. And so going on, I think we could expect that people will change their patterns and be much more comfortable with this type of delivery and access of products.
Jack Bobo, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate your time.